Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We are starting a new phase in the channel, I guess you can call it. It's basically we're going to be doing reactions or analysis of different scenes or parts, to be determined. But anyways, here we have a scene from Rocky, not the first Rocky movie, but it is an iconic scene where Rocky gives this motivational speech to his son. And we're basically going to look at it from the point of view of sports psychology and psychology, a bit of psychology in general. Obviously, reminding everybody that viewing that I am not a sports psychologist. I am a BA psychology student, and I will and with the intention and plan next year starting my master's in sports psychology. So we're just going to be looking at it from different points of view. I have different things written down, so I apologize if I keep looking down over here. So we're going to try this out. I've never also done this filming style of basically, watching something, reacting to it. So we're going to give it a shot. I hope everything works out smoothly. Here we go.
Living with you, it hasn't been easy. People see me, but they think of you. Now with all this going on...
So just to preface, the scene starts off with Rocky's son complaining or about to complain about his career and life trajectory, kind of projecting things going on in his life onto his dad based on a future fight that Rocky is supposed to partake in. He is considered to be a bit of a mockery at this point in the movie because Rocky at this point is older and the fight isn't necessarily as well respected as it would have been in his prime.
This is going to be worse than ever.
It don't have to be.
No, sure it does.
Why? You got a lot going on, kid.
Well, my last name? That's the reason I got a decent job. That's the reason why people deal with me in the first place. Now I start to get a little ahead. I start to get a little something for myself. And this happens.
So just to start off, he talks about his reputation and how he got to where he is in life right now. And you can see already from Rocky's reaction that there's a bit of confusion in his face or maybe a bit of disappointment in just the way that his son perceives his own life. There is a tendency for different people have different tendencies based on their personality traits, but there's a tendency for people who have more, let's say, glass half empty kind of outlook on life to attribute their successes to an external force. In other words, it's not me, it's luck, it's the people I worked with, it's, in this case, my last name, and they attribute their failures to themselves. So, every time they do something wrong, it's them, and every time they do something right, it's someone else. So that's generally a negative outlook on life. The opposite would be if I have a positive outlook on life, then I would basically, attribute my successes to myself and my failures, not necessarily to other people, but I'd say that would be the exact opposite, and a more balanced version of those two things would probably be a healthy mindset to have, attributing your successes depending on if you actually was you or not to yourself, and attributing your failures, again, depending if it was you or not, taking responsibility or really understanding that maybe something wasn't your fault. If you were supposed to be at a job interview and the train you planned on getting on, the early train you planned on getting on, shut down and they canceled the trains for the rest of the day and that was your only way of getting to the interview, obviously that's not your fault. So it'd be a legitimate thing to blame the train system, especially since you showed up early. So let's get back to it.
Now, I'm asking you as a favor not to go through with this, okay? This is only going to end up bad for you, and it's going to end up bad for me.
All right, so just also real quick before he continues, end up bad for you and end up bad for me. We're going to see in a second that it's more about him than his dad.
You think I'm hurting you?
Yeah, in a way you are.
That's the last thing I...
So Rocky immediately starts off with, kind of changing the focal point to about the relationship between the two of them, because up till now his son has been talking about how other people will see the fight and how they will perceive what is going on, which again we'll get back into it in a moment, but it has a lot to do with the way the son views the world. Yeah.
I ever wanted to do.
I know that's not what you want to do, but that's just the way that it is. Don't you care what people think? Doesn't it bother you that people are making you out to be a joke and that I'm going to be included in that?
So his son obviously is letting out, is venting. It seems as though his words are saying that, he cares about his father's reputation as well. But as we'll see in the video as it goes on, he cares a bit more about his own reputation, at least in this scene. And a lot of that has to do with self-worth and self-esteem. A lot of our self-worth is affected and judged based on others, unfortunately. Um, and similar in the world of sports, the world of business actually has a lot of overlapping elements. And one of them really is the fact that our success in these industries is a lot of time affected by the view of other people. So if I succeed in a sporting event or something like that as an athlete, there are viewers, there are people to give me that positive reinforcement. Same thing in business. If I am pitching a business idea or I'm trying to create a new product and it succeeds, obviously I'd like that product to go to people, to go to a market. And obviously I would base my success based on other people's joy and use of this product or idea.
Do you think that's right? Do you?
You ain't gonna believe this, but you used to fit right here. I'd hold you up and say to your mother, this.
So just right here, I wanted to pause on this moment for a second. Rocky's son, his face, he's like, what are you talking about? He's kind of like, which, as you know, a son getting talks from parents, sometimes they can, like, you know, change the topic a tiny bit, and it's kind of annoying. It's kind of like, you know, where are you going with this? Why aren't you focusing on the point? But in this particular case, Rocky does a smart thing, which is basically he's diffusing the tension that's been built up by his son. His son just vented a lot. He doesn't want to dismiss how his son feels, but at the same time, he also doesn't want to like feed off that same energy and just shoot it back at him. Obviously, this is a movie and we're not dealing with real people, and this was obviously all directed. But if you're ever in an argument with someone, you should try to find a way similar to what Rocky did here, which is basically to kind of diffuse the situation. But there is a problem with that. So Rocky's son, prior to this moment, was basically doing what's called rationalization. So supposedly his son is not happy with his life up to this point, and he's looking for reasons as to, you know, why that is or what can make it better. So he has the underlying problem, which is he's unhappy with his current situation, and he rationalizes it, which is by explaining that, you know, everything he's gotten thus far is thanks to his last name, and, you know, this fight is going to ruin some more of his reputation, and just as he's getting ahead, now it's all going to go downhill. And he's scared about what's going to happen to his dad. He's scared about what's going to happen to his reputation. But instead of facing that reality, he's rationalizing it as it's his dad's fault, or he's rationalizing it as this is not his responsibility or his problem directly. Now, what Rocky's about to do, he's about to give this little speech, obviously the main focal point of this video. But one thing to note is that if you're in a real situation where you're in an argument with someone, especially a loved one, and you're about to sort of, I guess, preach to them or kind of give them a life lesson, or tell them the harsh truth, note that a lot of times when it comes to psychology, people will have they will resist. They won't necessarily agree right away with your opinion because it's not something that stemmed from them. Sort of like you have to inception people to come up with the idea themselves to view it in its purest form. But if it's coming from someone you trust and a loved one, there's much more of a likelihood that you'll accept the reality at face value and just straight up, as opposed to kind of winding the way to the point.
This kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. This kid's gonna be so.
Here, like I was saying, it's like, look at that face. He's like, God, why are you talking about this? This is so classic you to just change the subject.
Somebody better than anybody ever knew. And you grew up good and wonderful. It was great just watching you every day. It was like a privilege. Then the time come for you to be your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line.
So here, just want to point out the tone of the speech changes. Somewhere along the line.
You changed.
Here, also, you can see his son's body language is changing. He understands that the change of topic that his dad was having was not the point of what he was going to say, and now his body language is getting a little more closed. He's getting a bit more defensive. He's getting ready for basically an attack. He knows his dad's about to give him some truth, and he's preparing for it physically.
Stop being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for something to blame, like a big shadow.
I love that analogy, the shadow. I feel like a lot of times we can also kind of associate with this or just kind of resonate with this. Whenever we feel something, when strong emotions that are just overbearing, it kind of does feel like you're in a giant shadow. I mean, it encompasses every aspect of your life. Whether you're eating, you're sleeping, or trying to go to sleep. Once you're asleep, obviously, it's not up to you entirely. But or doing homework or with friends, as long as you're not fully distracted, you can just kind of feel the overbearing weight of whatever emotions that you're having due to whatever's going on in your life. And that's kind of like a shadow, just overbearing.
Let me tell you something you already know.
Okay, so just before Rocky goes into this, I just also want to say Rocky is also changing the focal point of his son's perspective. In other words, up to now his son was looking at himself outward at his dad, and now he's kind of changing the perspective and pointing the finger back at his son, saying that it's not society's problem for looking at you, it's not society's problem for looking at me, it's society's problem, it's your problem for letting society's outlook affect you, in this sense. So it's kind of like a flashlight, you know, it's like, where's your attention right now? And he's turning the light back on his son.
The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody.
Here, his son is, obviously, like I said, if it's someone from a loved one, and also it's a movie, but his son is nodding. In other words, yeah, like I know that. I know that's the way life works. It's probably also what his father taught him growing up. This isn't the first conversation they've ever had. But yeah, he's nodding yes, because he's giving him like a harsh truth. And he said, again, something you already know. It's one thing that if you watch the Rocky movies, and specifically this one, Rocky's never condescending to his son. Rocky also considers himself to be less intelligent than his son. His son is more learned and has more, I guess, book knowledge compared to Rocky and his upbringing. So he never looks down on his son. And even now, when he's giving like a life lesson, and he can, like, you know, he's still not looking down on him. He tells him, I'm going to tell you something you already know. But a lot of times, when you hear something from someone else, you know, when you're giving a friend advice, you know, and it sounds great, and then you try to give yourself that same advice, and it just doesn't work. So sometimes it's important to hear things from other people's perspective.
He's gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
So that's how winning is done. Is I think my favorite line in this clip, and obviously it connects directly to sports psychology. And then he talks about that's how winning is done. So obviously there's a different mindset when it comes to sports athletes, winning versus losing. You know, how do you take losing and then move forward? Obviously, life isn't just a series of victories. We have a lot of losses throughout life and many different aspects and avenues of our life. But what makes the difference is obviously perspective and also what you do with it. So like mental fortitude and resilience, and those mental resilience is your ability to, you know, bounce back and see things from a different point of view, which is what Rocky talks about now. It's your ability to get back up. In other words, if you have a bad training session, if you have a bad anything, right? If you look at it as a stepping stone or as an experience, as opposed to, I messed this up, it's all over. It's same thing with, I heard people say on, let's say, what go on certain, like changing their eating habits, right? And they'll, you know, try to eat less or eat more. And then they'll have a screw up, one meal. Like, I messed it up. Okay, I'll start again tomorrow. Well, I'll start again next week. We, as people, need to try to look at things as a whole and not as an entire event, an entire series in one go. And that's a big difference between winning and losing. We're not going to get into that right now, but through that kind of mentality, methods such as CBT or ACT were invented in the realm of positive psychology, and we can address that in a different video, but this is just kind of like a taster.
Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always gonna love you no matter what. No matter what happens.
So Rocky, he does finish off here with like an acceptance. In other words, he says all these things, he yells at him, he doesn't say it lightly, he gives it to him blunt, but at the end he also finishes off with, you know, I'm still your father, I still love you, I'm still here, which is an excellent way to end any form of argument or discussion. not by telling people that you're their father and that you love them. I'm just, you get what I mean.
You're my son, you're my blood. You're the best thing in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't gonna have a life.
So I touched upon this in the beginning, but also self-worth and self-value is basically something that can affect other aspects of your life. So a person with like low self-esteem or whatnot, it'll not just affect, the way they, function at work. It can make them potentially more violent. It can make a person, be sad in other aspects. And on top of that, even dealing with self-worth, and as we're trying to raise self-worth, if done too intensely or without a proper plan in mind, that itself can be a stressor. In other words, you can get stressed by trying to improve your own self-worth. So it's not as simple as it may seem.
Don't forget to visit your mother.
So that's the end of that scene. And really, what I really love about that is that Rocky gives it like a second. He lets it sit, and his son also doesn't argue back. His son doesn't, immediately, say you're wrong or you don't know, whatever. He kind of lets it simmer. He lets it, doesn't say anything, ends on a positive note. So this was a bit of a mess, and I did not hit all the points I wanted to hit. I feel like this kind of went in many directions, both psychology-wise and sports psychology-wise. I will be refining this skill of reviewing these kind of things. I hope you enjoyed it, even though it was a bit of a mess, and hope to see you next time.